My name is Olivia. I am 36 years old, and last Christmas I found out exactly how much my own family thought I was worth. It started with a joke at my expense, the kind my mother loves to slip in between bites of turkey and sips of cheap wine. She waved her fork at me and said, in front of everyone, "So, how's that little online thing you do? Still playing on your laptop instead of getting a real job?" The table laughed. My brother laughed the loudest, and I did what I always do. I smiled, swallowed the sting, and said I was fine. I had spent weeks planning that dinner, ordering expensive food through apps, timing deliveries so everything would feel effortless and cozy. They didn't notice. To them, I was still the daughter who made do, the one who scraped by with some vague freelance work and a lot of luck. When the conversation drifted back to my brother's potential and his grand plans that never seemed to materialize, I slipped away to the living room to check something on my laptop. One tab showed a live dashboard, numbers updating in real time, the result of years of building something they had never bothered to ask about. I thought I closed it before I went to refill my mom's glass. I didn't. A few minutes later, my brother wandered in, looking for a place to sit, and saw the screen I'd left open. $14 million. That's what stared back at him. The next sound I heard was his voice, cracking as he shouted for everyone to come look. In seconds, they went from mocking my pathetic job to demanding I hand over what they suddenly decided they were owed. If you've ever had your success laughed at 1 minute and treated like a family ATM the next, stay with me, because what happened after that Christmas dinner changed everything. I didn't wake up one day with $14 million on a screen. It started a long time before that, back when I was a kid in a cramped apartment just outside New York City, learning quietly that my place in the family was to be the one who didn't need much. My mom, Linda, liked to say I was born independent. She meant it as a compliment, but it was really an excuse. My dad died in a car accident when I was 10, and after that our world shrank overnight. Bills piled up, my mom worked late at an office job she hated, and my older brother, Tyler, became the center of her universe. He was 2 years older, loud, dramatic, sensitive. Whenever he struggled in school, my mom wrapped him in concern. "He's been through so much," she'd whisper, smoothing his hair. "We need to be gentle with him." When I got good grades, she barely looked up from the sink. "Of course you did. You're strong, Olivia. You always figure it out." That was the pattern. If Tyler forgot to take out the trash, she said he was distracted. If I forgot, it was, "Olivia, I can't count on you for one simple thing." I started cooking for us using recipes I found on YouTube, packing my own lunches, doing laundry, because someone had to. Tyler stayed in his room, yelling at video games and streaming basketball games, already obsessed with stats and scores in a way that later turned into something darker. I stopped asking for help with anything, because the answer was always the same: "We don't have time, we don't have money, you'll be fine." By the time I hit high school in Brooklyn, I had figured out that if I wanted a different life, no one in that apartment was going to build it for me. I joined the business club because it meant I could stay late at school instead of going home to chaos. I found free coding lessons on Khan Academy and spent nights hunched over the old family laptop, teaching myself basic JavaScript while Tyler used the TV to scream at whatever game he was watching. In the library, I wandered into the personal finance section, pulled out a beat-up book about investing, and felt something click. The idea that money could be moved, grown, managed instead of just feared was like oxygen. I got a part-time job at Starbucks, telling my mom it was just for fun money, while she handed Tyler cash for emergencies that somehow always lined up with big games. I saved tips in a separate account, and one afternoon, heart-pounding, I downloaded an investing app and bought my first tiny slice of a company for less than the cost of a pair of sneakers. No one cared enough to ask what I was doing. When my school had a small awards night and I got recognized for academic achievement and leadership in the business club, my mom promised she would try to make it. But that same night, there was a big NBA game in the city, and Tyler was desperate to go. She chose him. I remember standing on that stage, accepting a certificate while other parents cheered and took photos, and staring at the empty seat where she was supposed to be. That was the night I stopped hoping they'd notice my effort and started quietly planning a life where they wouldn't have to notice at all, because I wouldn't need anything from them. Getting into college wasn't some movie moment for me. It was a spreadsheet, a calendar, and 100 tiny decisions no one else saw. I filled out my own FAFSA forms at the kitchen table, while my mom argued with the internet company on the phone, and Tyler shouted at a bad call on TV. I wrote my application essays on that same old laptop, then rewrote them until my eyes blurred, because I knew this was my ticket out. When I opened the email from NYU and saw the word congratulations, it felt unreal. A partial scholarship, grants, and enough aid that, if I worked part-time, I could actually go. My mom said she was proud, but it came out distracted, like an automatic response. "That's great, honey. Just don't move too far. We still need you around." Tyler rolled his eyes and muttered something about nerd school. I moved into a cramped dorm in Manhattan with a girl from Ohio who thought the subway was exotic and terrifying. I thought it was freedom. My major was finance, but my real education happened after class. I signed up for every free workshop, every networking event that offered cheap pizza, any club that sounded even vaguely connected to money or tech. I kept coding too, posting a gig on a freelancing site, and slowly picking up small jobs building basic dashboards or fixing bugs. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough for groceries and textbooks, and it made me realize people would hand over real money if you knew how to make their numbers make sense. Back home, nothing changed. My mom complained about bills. Tyler bounced in and out of a local community college program, then dropped out completely. He'd started betting on sports through his phone. "Just $20 here and there," he said. Then one day my mom called me crying because his little bets had quietly turned into thousands of dollars in debt on her credit card. I could hear him in the background yelling that he'd figure it out, that the next game would hit big. It made me sick to my stomach. I picked up extra freelance work, staying up until 3 in the morning to finish code after studying, so I could send my mom a few $100s here and there. I told her it was just leftover scholarship money because I didn't want to admit I was working myself into the ground to keep her above water while she bailed Tyler out with a bucket full of holes. When I graduated from NYU, I did it with honors and a job offer from a small but fast-growing fintech company downtown. No one came to my ceremony. My mom said she couldn't get the time off, and Tyler didn't see the point. I watched other students pose with parents holding flowers and balloons and took my own photo with my phone, cap in hand, robe slightly wrinkled. My first job title was something bland like junior analyst, but the work was electric to me. We built tools that helped people move and track their money, analyzed startups that wanted to partner with us, sat in on pitches from founders with more ideas than sleep. I soaked up everything. I learned how to read a balance sheet like a language, how cap tables and equity really worked, how insane it was that people poured millions into tiny teams with nothing but a prototype and a deck. Through coworkers, I found AngelList and started following early-stage fintech companies the way Tyler followed betting lines. I also got my first real salary, plus a small bonus at the end of the year. That was when I made a decision that would come back to haunt me. Later, I set up an automatic transfer of $2,000 a month to my mom. I told her my company paid better than expected, and I wanted to help. She cried, thanked me, and then turned around and used a big chunk of it to pay off more of Tyler's gambling debt. I could see the pattern, but I told myself I was doing the right thing, that good daughters help. At work, my manager pulled me into meetings I had no business being in on paper, letting me sit quietly while investors talked about valuations and exits. At home, I watered plants on my tiny fire escape and pretended the second life I was building on my laptop was just a hobby. The truth was, by then, I already had a few small angel investments of my own through platforms that let regular people in, and one early fintech app I'd backed was starting to take off. I didn't tell my family any of that. If they barely respected my job now, I didn't want to imagine what they'd do if they knew I was playing in a world they couldn't even name. The longer I worked in fintech, the harder it became to ignore the gap between what I was doing for other people and what I was doing for myself. By day, I helped our company evaluate potential partners and products. I ran numbers on startups, pointed out red flags, highlighted upside, watched other people write the checks and reap the returns. By night, I was still that girl hunched over a laptop, except now my spreadsheets were cleaner and my bets were smarter. The small fintech app I had backed was growing fast enough to land on industry blogs, then got picked up in a funding round, led by a big-name firm. My tiny early stake doubled, then tripled on paper. That was the first time I thought, maybe I am not just lucky. At the office, one of the senior guys joked that if I ever left, I would end up running my own fund. He meant it lightly, but the idea stuck. I started tracking my personal investments the way we tracked portfolios, setting targets, diversifying, writing down my thesis for each startup or stock. Tyler, meanwhile, was sinking deeper into sports betting. There was always a new system, a hot tip, a must-win game that would fix everything. My mom, Linda, stayed locked in a cycle of panic and denial. She would call me whispering about late notices and then brush it off when I offered to help with a budget. "You don't understand," she would say. "Your brother is under so much pressure." The automatic transfer I had set up for her each month became normal, expected, invisible. If anything, she hinted it was not quite enough. Yet when we talked about my job, she still called it that online money thing, like I was barely clinging to some internet scam. The turning point came after a year and a half at the company. One of the startups we had watched from the sidelines got acquired by a major tech player for a number that made the whole office buzz. My tiny angel position in that same company, one I had scraped together from freelance income and bonuses, suddenly became real money when I sold part of it. I remember staring at the confirmation email, feeling like the floor under my life had shifted. It was not 14 million yet, but it was more than anyone in my family had ever seen in one place. I sat in my little apartment that night, counting not just the dollars but the hours, the nights I had spent exhausted, the birthdays and holidays I had missed to work, the ceremonies my family had missed for me. I realized I was waiting for permission I was never going to get. No one was going to tell me it was time to bet on myself. So I did. Leaving the company was terrifying. I did not storm out dramatically. I spent months building a plan, saving aggressively, talking quietly with a few people I trusted. When I gave notice, my manager asked if I had another offer. I told him I was starting my own investment vehicle focused on early-stage fintech. He blinked, then started laughing in genuine delight. "I knew it," he said. "You have the brain for this. Just promise you will let us into your first big round." I left with a small cushion, a few angel stakes, and a head full of other people's playbooks. I set up a legal structure, opened business accounts, spent hours in ugly conference rooms with bored bank officers explaining that yes, I understood the risks. I built a simple website and took meetings with founders in coffee shops, on Zoom, wherever they would talk. The first year was brutal. There were weeks I questioned whether I had just torched a perfectly good career for an ego trip. A couple of early bets went sideways. A startup I believed in fell apart over founder drama. I woke up in the middle of the night checking cash flow projections. I kept my own salary low and my lifestyle almost ascetic. Back home, none of that reality existed. Linda liked to say, half bragging and half worried, that I worked on the computer now. She had no idea that the wire transfers she got each month were coming from a business account, not a paycheck. I increased her support to $4,000 a month after my second year, when two of my portfolio companies hit big milestones and a third one closed a major funding round that multiplied my stake on paper again. She did not ask if I could afford it. She simply started talking about buying nicer things. Packages from Amazon and other online stores appeared on her doorstep in every photo she sent. Tyler kept gambling, just with bigger swings. He called me once to ask if I could spot him $5,000 until his sure thing hit. I said no and listened to him call me cold, selfish, lucky. Meanwhile, my numbers quietly climbed. A mobile payment startup I backed early got acquired by a giant tech company. Another one went public. I learned to ride the volatility, to take some chips off the table when I could, to keep enough liquidity for new deals. The dashboard I checked every morning became my real reflection, more honest than any family conversation. The total value crept up. 2,000,005,8. By the time it crossed 14 million in combined equity and liquid assets, I was so used to managing risk that the number felt less like a miracle and more like a long, hard-earned equation finally balancing out. Still, I kept living like my old self. My clothes were from thrift stores and online sales. My apartment was decent but small. When I went to visit my mother, I wore the same beat-up sneakers I had in college. She would shake her head and joke that she wished I would find a real job with a pension, like the ones older relatives had had decades ago. I let her believe whatever made her comfortable. I told myself I was avoiding drama, that if they knew the truth, they would just worry or misunderstand. Deep down, I knew better. I knew exactly how they saw me, how they saw money, and I knew what would happen if those two things ever collided. But denial is a warm, easy blanket until someone yanks it off. That yank came with tinsel and Christmas lights, in the form of a phone call from my mother a few weeks before December 25th. Her voice tight and trembling as she talked about how impossible it was going to be to afford a proper family Christmas this year. When my mom called about Christmas this time, she didn't even bother with small talk. Just launched straight into a long, exhausted sigh and a list of numbers. The heating bill, the grocery prices, how even the cheap plastic wreaths at the drugstore had gone up. "I just don't know how I'm supposed to give your brother a proper Christmas," she said, like she was reading from a script she'd been practicing all week. Behind her voice, I could hear the TV, commentators buzzing about an early game, and then Tyler yelling at something he didn't like. A second later, he shouted, not bothering to move away from the phone, "Ask her about the car, Mom!" as if he were ordering takeout. She hesitated, then softened her voice like she was about to ask for a favor, not drop a bomb. She started talking about how his car was unreliable, how he couldn't get to interviews, how a better car would mean more opportunities, how he was ready to turn things around if someone would just give him a chance. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the city through my apartment window, and almost laughed. Tyler had been turning things around for a decade. He'd turned in a full circle so many times he was dizzy. I opened my banking app without even meaning to, thumb moving by habit, seeing numbers most people would kill for. I could have bought him a better car outright and barely felt it. That was the worst part about where I was financially. It made every boundary feel like a choice, not a necessity, and my family knew it. I didn't talk about that. I took a breath, pushed the idea of a car off the table, and offered something else. I told my mom I'd handle Christmas dinner. All of it. Food, drinks, whatever she needed to feel like things were proper. "You don't have to worry about a thing," I said. "Just tell me how many people and what time you want everyone there." She made a weak noise about not wanting me to overspend, but under it there was this unmistakable exhale of relief, like a knot in her chest had loosened. "I don't want you going broke for one night," she said, and the irony almost choked me. I reassured her with a half-truth, the kind that comes easy when you've been smoothing things over your whole life. I told her my company had good holiday deals with certain restaurants, that I could get a package if I booked early. She didn't ask for details. She never did when the story ended with her not having to pay. Over the next couple of weeks, my life split in two, in an even sharper way. In one half, I was on calls with founders about runway, burn rates, partnership terms. I was reading legal docs, reviewing cap tables, watching a market calendar that mattered to my fund. In the other half, I was scrolling through menus and reviews, comparing catering options, calculating how much turkey a certain number of adults and kids would eat, checking delivery windows, and making sure I didn't schedule anything too close to a football kickoff, because Linda liked the game on in the background. I built the dinner like I'd build a portfolio, balancing cost, quality, timing. I ordered an organic turkey from an upscale place that did holiday roasts, sides from a different spot known for their mac and cheese and roasted vegetables, fancy desserts from a bakery my clients actually used for office events, and a couple of bottles of wine that didn't come with cartoon labels. By the time I was done, the total hovered around $3,000 and change. I stared at the number on my phone for a second, feeling a flicker of old guilt, then reminded myself I had spent more than that on one early-stage check that didn't pan out. I was allowed to spend it on myself, and, unfortunately, on the same people who still saw me as barely scraping by. When my mom texted again to ask nervously how I was affording all that, I sent her a screenshot of a fake employee holiday discount graphic I had thrown together in Canva in 10 minutes and told her my firm had partnered with some local places. She sent back a string of heart emojis and a message about how, "You always find a way, Liv." I didn't remind her who had actually found the ways all these years. On Christmas Day, I showed up early with my arms full of smaller things that made the whole spread look more homemade. I brought herbs and nice napkins, a couple of extra appetizers I could assemble in her cramped kitchen, and bakery boxes that made everything feel like I'd been running around town instead of tapping a screen. Linda opened the door in an old red sweater, makeup a little heavier than usual, and automatically tried to peek into the bags to gauge exactly how much I'd brought. "You didn't have to do all this," she said, then added, "I just hope it's not too much for your budget," the way some people ask if you're sure you want dessert. Inside, the house looked almost exactly the same as when I'd left for college the first time, just more crowded with stuff bought late at night from online stores. A blinking string of colored lights fought with the glare from the TV. Tyler wasn't there yet. My mom fussed with the table, rearranging cutlery and making unnecessary comments about how her plates didn't match nice dinners like this. I moved through the kitchen in practiced silence, making everything look effortless. It struck me, not for the first time, that she had no idea what my actual work looked like, but she trusted me completely to plate Brussels sprouts. Relatives started arriving in waves, stamping snow off their boots, shrugging out of coats, bringing cheap bottles of wine and grocery store pies. They complimented the smell, the spread, the turkey. My mom took credit for coordinating while pointing proudly at me as the one who got some deal through her job. The story of my life reduced to a coupon. When Tyler finally walked in, he did it with the same energy he'd had at 16 hoodie, unshaven, eyes glued to his phone. He nodded at me, said, "Hey," and went straight to the living room to check scores. I watched him drop onto the couch like he owned it, phone in one hand, remote in the other. For a second I pictured him behind the wheel of a car I'd bought, driving to a casino instead of a job interview, and felt an almost physical wave of relief that I'd said no. I had my laptop in my bag, the same one I always carried, Not because I wanted to work, but because this particular day was tied to something important for my fund. One of my portfolio companies was moving through a major event, and markets don't pause for family holidays. I told myself I'd slip away for 5 minutes at some point, check a couple of dashboards, make sure there weren't any fires I needed to put out. The idea made me feel half guilty, half satisfied. At the table, once everyone was seated and plates were full, the conversation followed its usual orbit jobs: money, who was laid off, whose kid got promoted. A cousin talked about her raise at a hospital. An uncle complained about his boss. Then, as if she couldn't stop herself, Linda pivoted to me. She clinked her glass for attention, just slightly. "Olivia works on the computer," she announced, as though I were not right there. "Some kind of freelance web thing, very unstable." She gave a little laugh, the kind that was supposed to be self-deprecating but landed like a jab. "We keep telling her she needs a solid job with benefits and a pension, but you know kids these days." A few people chuckled politely, the way you do when someone older is clearly working through their own anxieties out loud. Tyler didn't look up from his phone when he added, "Must be nice to just sit on a laptop all day," under his breath. "If I could get paid for that, I'd be rich too." I felt the familiar sting, but it was dull now, like pressing on an old bruise. I knew the truth down to the decimal point. I knew I could buy that entire table's yearly income and still barely dent my net worth. The fact that they still imagined me as one bill away from disaster had nothing to do with reality, and everything to do with the story they needed to tell themselves. I smiled, said my work was fine, changed the subject to the food, asked about someone's kids. It was easier for the moment to play their version of me than to start a fight in front of the gravy boat. Between courses, I slipped into the living room, laptop under my arm, and sat on the edge of the couch while everyone else fought over whose turn it was with the remote. I opened my inbox, checked a couple of updates from a founder in a different time zone, glanced at a market app that showed green bars where I needed them. My fund, my deals, my numbers all quietly doing what they were supposed to do, while my family assumed I was scrolling social media. For a second, I let myself imagine what it would be like to tell the truth in this room, to say out loud, "This is what I built. This is why your lights never got shut off." Then I shut the thought down. I wasn't here to impress them. I was here to get through a holiday. I closed my email, minimized the charts, and rested my hands on the keyboard, thinking I'd check things again after dinner, after dessert, when everyone was drifting into their food comas and the games blended together. For now, I told myself, I would just breathe, smile, and play the part they'd written for me one more time, not realizing that this was the last quiet moment I'd ever have in that house. I knew something was off the moment the room went quiet in that wrong way, not comfortable, just tight. I was in the kitchen when Tyler shouted my name, voice high and shaken. "Olivia, what is this?" My mom followed with, "Is this some kind of joke?" And my stomach dropped. I walked into the living room and saw it immediately, my laptop open on the coffee table. Tyler bent over it, everyone else half out of their chairs. On the screen was the dashboard I checked every morning, front and center. Total portfolio value $14,023,000. Underneath, a list of holdings and charts. I hadn't closed it. I hadn't locked the screen. Tyler jabbed at the number. "Tell me this is fake. Tell me this is a game or something." I looked at the screen, then at him. "It's not fake," I said. "It's my portfolio, my fund, my work." My mom stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. $14 million, she almost screamed. "You have $14 million? Nobody said wow or congrats. They just stared like I'd been caught stealing. Tyler's face turned red. "You've been sitting on this while Mom is drowning in bills? While I'm stressed out of my mind? 14 million? My mom's voice shook. How could you not tell us? We have struggled. We sacrificed. Your brother has been through so much, and you hid this? I took a breath. I haven't been hiding. I've been working. And I've been sending you money every month. I've helped. Helping? She snapped. Little drips while you sit on a fortune? We paid for your whole childhood. We gave you everything we had. You think that money is just yours? Tyler jumped in. Do you know what I could do with that? The pressure I'm under? The anxiety? If I had capital, real capital, I could turn everything around. I deserve a chance more than you do. You had chances, I said. You had Mom's cards, my transfers. You didn't invest. You gambled. He glared at me. You don't get it. Your brain doesn't work like mine. I see patterns. I've been handicapped because we were broke. You were supposed to help. My mom softened her tone, trying another angle. She took my arm. Sweetheart, listen. We're your family. 14 million is more than one person needs. Your brother has issues. He's sensitive. He's had a harder life. You could pay off his debts, help him get a car, set him up. You could make sure I don't have to worry if the lights stay on. That's what a good daughter does. It was the same script as always, just louder and with more zeros. I have helped, I said, for years, while I worked 2 jobs in college, while I built this. You never asked how. You just took it and hinted it wasn't enough. Because it wasn't, Tyler exploded. Look at that number. You let us struggle while you hit the jackpot. What kind of person does that? The kind whose awards you skipped to take him to basketball games, I said. The kind who had to raise herself while you played. The kind who filled out her own college forms while you racked up gambling debt. The kind who built this without $1 from you. My mom's face hardened. We did our best. Your brother was fragile. He needed more. You were always fine. No, I said. I was just easier to ignore. And now you want to cash that in. Tyler stepped closer, crowding me. Drop the act. You're rich. You can fix everything with one transfer. You owe us. We made you. I actually laughed. You didn't make me. Your neglect did. Your favoritism did. I owe you respect, not my net worth. My mom's voice went cold. If you refuse to help, you're being selfish. People will hear about this. They'll know my millionaire daughter lets her own family suffer. I'm not refusing to help, I said. I'm refusing to be your ATM. I am done sending money. As of right now. The room froze. Then everyone started talking at once. You can't be serious. You can't do that. Tyler kicked a chair, sending it crashing. You think that stupid screen makes you better than us? You're going to die alone with your money. He lunged toward the coffee table like he might grab the laptop. I stepped between him and it. Touch my stuff and I call the police, I said, calm. Threaten me, lie about me online, and I call a lawyer. I'm not a kid anymore. For a second he hesitated. My mom started crying loudly, talking about betrayal, how she never thought one of her children would treat her like this. The relatives stared, trapped in a family drama they hadn't signed up for. I closed the laptop, slid it into my bag, and picked up my coat. I'm leaving, I said. We're not going to solve years of this over turkey. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back, my mom said. I paused. I've been walking out alone my whole life, I said quietly. This is just the first time you noticed. Then I left. By the time I reached my car, my phone was buzzing non-stop texts from my mom, from Tyler, from the family group chat. By the time I was back in my apartment, I saw my mother's long Facebook post about her ungrateful investor daughter who chose money over blood, and Tyler's dramatic comments about his cold-hearted sister refusing to help with his mental health struggles. I put the phone down, opened my laptop again, and instead of checking my portfolio, I pulled up my lawyer's email. If they wanted to turn me into the villain for finally saying no, fine. The next chapter would not be played on their terms. The next morning, my lawyer called me back after reading the screenshots and posts I'd attached. I expected him to tell me to ignore it, to just block everyone and move on. But he didn't. He walked me through words like defamation, harassment, intentional infliction, and told me very calmly that I was allowed to protect myself, even from my own family. Within a week, he had drafted a cease and desist letter addressed to my mother and my brother, laying out exactly what they were to stop doing, calling me out by name online, spreading lies about my mental health, implying I had stolen money from them, threatening to ruin my reputation if I didn't pay. The letter was firm, not dramatic. It gave them a deadline to delete everything and warned that if they kept it up, the next step would be court. My mother called me in a rage when she got it. She said I was tearing the family apart, that lawyers were for enemies, not for the woman who gave birth to me. I repeated the same line each time: if you stop lying and harassing me, you never have to hear from my lawyer again. Tyler tried to play tough over text, bragging that no judge would side with a greedy millionaire over her suffering family. But within days, his posts quietly disappeared. The threats turned into long, self-pitying messages I didn't answer. I muted the group chat. I blocked, then unblocked only so I could keep a record. Time did the rest. Without my transfers, the financial reality hit hard. Tyler's betting apps stopped letting him deposit because he had maxed out everything tied to his name. The people he owed money to were not as patient as my mother. They called, they showed up, they demanded. A cousin, the one who had looked the most uncomfortable that night, sent me a private message months later. She said Tyler had finally been pushed into a rehab program after a scare and a minor incident with the police. He was still angry at everyone, but for the first time he was being forced to look at his gambling as an addiction, not a personality trait. Linda did what she always did. At first she tried to handle it alone. She asked neighbors for small loans, maxed out new cards, tried to sell things online. But there is only so much you can squeeze from people who have already been squeezed dry. The story she had told on Facebook about her selfish rich daughter started to backfire. Some friends felt bad for her, sure, but others started to ask quiet questions. If I was really that awful, how had she struggled for years while buying new gadgets and covering her adult son's habits? One of her church friends, who had seen my messages over the years offering to pay for therapy and financial counseling, stepped back. Then another. Eventually, the invitations slowed and the sympathy posts dried up. When she finally sold the house to pay off the worst of the debt and move into a small apartment, I heard about it secondhand. A different relative sent me the listing, then a photo of the sold sign with a simple note. I'm sorry it came to this, but I also know it's not on you. It hurt to see the place I grew up in disappear, even after everything. But I also knew that house had been burning for a long time. Me not throwing more money on the fire didn't cause it to collapse. It just meant I wasn't standing inside when it did. Meanwhile, my life got quieter and clearer. I doubled down on work, but not in a frantic way. I set my own salary at a number that felt comfortable but not ridiculous, hired a few more people so I wasn't doing everything alone, and finally took a break long enough to remember what sleep felt like. I also made a decision I knew my family would have mocked if they'd still had access to me. I committed a portion of my fund's profits to a program that teaches financial literacy to girls and young women who feel like they have to be the strong one in their families. The kind of girl who fills out her own forms, who hears "you'll be fine" as an excuse, not a compliment. It felt right to send the ladder back down to people who might need it and actually want it. Some nights, when the city is quiet and my inbox is finally empty, I think about that Christmas dinner. For a long time, I was angry that my biggest financial milestone got twisted into the ugliest fight of my life. Now I see it as the moment the mask came off. $14 million didn't change my family. It just exposed what was already there, amplified and undeniable. The biggest lesson I took from all of it wasn't about money, it was about boundaries. You can love people and still say no. You can acknowledge someone's pain without letting them use it as a weapon against you. Blood is not a free lifetime contract to your time, your energy, or your bank account. If you're reading this and you're the responsible one, the independent one, the person everyone assumes will fix everything, I want you to hear this. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to protect yourself. You're not a bad daughter, son, or sibling for refusing to be drained dry. And if you've been through something similar, if your success made your family see you as a wallet instead of a person, I'd honestly like to know what you did. Did you stay and keep paying, or did you walk away and finally choose yourself?